Assalam and welcome to another weekend reflection on this, the 2nd of May 2026. Today, I would like to return back to this book that we did a couple of episodes on previously last year, Morality in the Quran by Muhammad Abdullah Draz, who was a well-known Azari scholar from the past century. And I'll continue from where we left off last time on page 17 of the book. Antinomies of obligation. The notion of obligation forces us to consider a number of practical antinomies. The two considered in this work are unity and diversity, and authority and liberty. A. Unity and diversity. The scientific nature of ethics requires that its laws are both necessary and universal. But because it is also a normative science that governs human behavior, it must also consider the realities of life, which are characterized by change, diversity, and renewal. Striking a balance between these two extremes is the first ethical challenge. B. Authority and liberty. The second ethical challenge, related to the first, involves resolution of the opposing tendencies of authority of the legislator and freedom of the subject. Robust authority requires consistent and definitive rules so that circumstances do not alter them. In this sense, moral law is no different than natural law. Freedom and the application of freedom of our conscience under such circumstances, however, are pointless. Yet if complete freedom of action is accepted, then rules emerge as nothing more than advice which can be accepted or ignored according to our impulses. The Quran takes a conciliatory approach to these two assumed contradictory demands. So you see, there's these two aspects. One, which is unity. If you have any kind of community or society, you need to have some sense of unity. If people don't feel that they belong within that community, within that society, or within that country, it creates tensions between people within the community. If these tensions get out of hand, then they can cause the whole community to fracture, for people to be fighting one another when they're supposed to be neighbors of one another. And on the other hand, you've got diversity. People are naturally diverse. Literally, even in Britain, if we had nobody who immigrated to this country from other parts of the world, even amongst the English, the Welsh, the Scottish, and the Irish, there's diversity. Even amongst Catholics and Anglicans and other kinds of Christians, and even people who still have beliefs that predate Christianity, there's diversity. And of course, other people over the generations have come to live in the country from elsewhere in the world. Similarly, with authority and liberty, you have to have a sense of authority within a society. You have to have a standard. You have to have some kind of law and order. If you don't, you have chaos. You look at the streets of Britain at the moment where people are being stabbed and all sorts of things that are happening, which should not be happening in any civilized society. At the same time, though, you can't have authority to the extent that it squashes everyone. People need to have their freedom. But that freedom has to be within parameters. Parameters being that they don't destroy other people's freedom, other people's ability to live. So you see, you've got this tension between these two things, unity and diversity, and authority and liberty. And a healthy society has a tension between them. It doesn't go too much towards unity that it destroys diversity. It doesn't go too much towards diversity that it fractures the society and causes it to collapse. Similarly, a healthy society has a sense of authority, has a sense of who is in the government, who the judges are, who has a right to make decisions on certain things within that society. But a healthy society also ensures the freedom of its people within reasonable parameters. So yeah, someone saying here on TikTok, subhanallah, it's so simple yet hard to implement for mankind. It's true. The principle is simple, but actually implementation of it, because of how people are, you know, people have egos. People who become powerful, they like their power. They like the ability that that power gives them. And so sometimes they abuse that power. Similarly, people who are ordinary people in the street, they like their freedom and they don't like other people telling them what to do. But we have to exist within within the tension between these parameters. So this is where something that Abdullah Draz is highlighting here in his book. And 4, Quranic conciliation. The idea of Quranic ethics is to perform one's duty without being concerned about the moral good at which it aims. It's interesting that, isn't it? Because even an atheist would actually have resonance with that. Instead, we evaluate actions in relation to the idea of a general rule which is applicable irrespective of consequences, moods, and emotions. No, I'm a Sunni, actually. The rule of our own behavior is measured against that with which we demand of others. The Quran states, do not give away the meanest of your earnings, things that you give yourself. Sorry, do not give away the meanest of your earnings that you yourself would not take except while cringing. Do not give away the meanest of your earnings that you yourself would not take except while cringing. Similarly, the Prophet stated, nobody can call himself a believer if he does not like for his brother that which he likes for himself. Now, this is the golden rule. You will find this principle that the Prophet stated that nobody should consider themselves a believer if they do not like for their brother or the sister what they want for themselves. This is also a principle that Jesus said, and pretty much is within all religions, that, you know, do unto others as you would like to be done to yourself, or do not do to others what you do not want done to yourself. This is a universal principle. You will find it in literally every single religion and every single good philosophy on earth. Similarly, the Prophet stated, no, yeah, I've just read that, sorry. Thus, we accept the reciprocity and universality of duty. An important realization emerges from this behavioral rule when a law is established as just ought to be universalized. The emphasis here is not on the possibility of universalization, but rather on the notion of justice. The rule must first and foremost be just. Undoubtedly, there are many rules that can be universalized to various extents, but which do not exhibit such moral necessity. Necessity is the justification for universality. Moral necessity proceeds from an internal value. For example, when we strive for universal peace, because it is necessary for human well-being and existence. So, you know, here, a very important point, that there's certain principles which are universal, which the Shaykh here is drawing from the Quran, is drawing from within Islam, but actually they're universal. You will find in various different ways, the same things are phrased within all of the different religions, within all different societies on earth. Why? Because certain things are necessary, like the example here that the Shaykh gives, that peace is necessary for human well-being and existence. Certain things are necessary, without which we cannot live. We cannot live, we cannot get married, we cannot provide for our families, we cannot provide for our children, we cannot educate us, you know, you just can't do anything. If you don't have peace, if you've got bombs coming on your head, or you're at war with your neighbors, how can you do anything? Certain things are necessary. And this is why, in spite of all the wars that happen in the world, the normality is not war. Wars do happen, sometimes unfortunately more frequently than we would like. But generally speaking, there has to be a state of relative peace. Universality is distinguished according to degrees. We cannot credibly grant all duties the same importance or urgency. The extension of any duty can only be determined through an understanding of the functions of its constitutive elements, as well as the reality of prevailing conditions. Without such an application of division and definition of duties, what is initially considered a duty may result in harm or, more seriously, a crime. The point that the Shaykh is getting at here is that we have different responsibilities and duties upon us. Whether we look at this as citizens within a society, whether we look at this as adherents of a religious tradition, we have certain duties upon us, but those duties vary in their importance. Certain things are vital. You know, we have a duty to safeguard each other, not to kill each other, not to fight each other, you know, not to cause trouble within the society, unless it's absolutely necessary for our self-defense or for the defense of those that we love. But under normal circumstances, you know, we do not do those things. Why? We have a duty for it. That's a vital duty. That's an important duty. But not every duty is the same. There may be other things that are duties that we have, but, you know, whether we do them or we don't do them, it's not a life and death situation. It's not going to stop us from being able to live a normal life. It may be a duty upon us, but they're obviously of a lesser importance. Being able to understand these things in proportion, in how they fit, is really, really important, because a lot of people get this wrong and then they create problems. I mean, a good example of this is we as Muslims, as we have a religious duty to read Salah, to pray. But does that mean that when we are walking down the road and we go, oh, it's time to pray, that we put our prayer mat down in the middle of the road and start praying? Obviously not, because that's ridiculous. That's crazy. We could get ourselves killed. We could cause a danger to other motorists on the road. You know, in previous times, to other people riding a chariot or something, we would cause a problem for them. And so within our religion, even though you see Muslims do this, we are not allowed to do that. We have to look for a safe place where we can pray, a clean place where we can pray, a place that's not going to cause trouble for anyone else. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a mosque. It could be in our home. It could be at the side within a cafe, a little place that's put aside for us, for people to pray with the permission of the cafe owners. It could be all sorts of places. But at the same time, it should be done responsibly. It should not be causing trouble to other people. Yes, we have a duty to pray, but we also have more of an important duty to safeguard those around us, because life is sacred. We should not be causing problems for people that could endanger their lives or endanger our own. The Shaykh continues, although many duties are not opposed to one another, that is, do not compete in their practical application, many others do. Thus, the duty not to lie or to kill can always be undertaken simultaneously. However, the duty to tell the truth while desiring to be polite or to protect a third party requires a moral determination that defines and prioritizes one imperative over the other. You get that? We have a duty to tell the truth. But let's say we are in a situation where if we told the full truth, it's actually going to cause a fight. How do you navigate that? How do you be polite? You have to make a moral determination. You have to make a decision. A hierarchy of values is consistently constructed and reconstructed in accordance with a set of perceived parameters and their impact on our relationships. In other words, our hierarchy of values always remains dynamic and flexible. That which is deemed necessary in one case may be secondary in another and irrelevant in a third. Imran, the topic is Salam alaikum. The topic is on morality in the Quran. I'm going from this book by Shaykh Muhammad Abdullah Draz, who was an Azari scholar from last century. So you see the hierarchy of values. This is why, I mean, people sometimes wonder, you hear of these great sheikhs in the past, like Imam Shafi, and when he went to Cairo, he gave one fatwa on what seemed to be the same situation. When he went to Jerusalem, he gave a different fatwa. It's because he was understanding the local context. He was understanding the local situation. So what may be necessary in one case is not necessary in another case. And it could be secondary. It might still be a consideration that you would make in making a decision, but it would be secondary. It wouldn't be primary. And in another situation, it could be totally irrelevant. The Shaykh continues, our wills are guided by abstract formulations of general rules and particularities of specific situations. Only reality can dictate the ultimate hierarchy of values. In this way, in order to determine the duty of a given moment, the last word will be reserved for each person's own judgment, maybe even to what is called their sixth sense. Conclusion. In the Quran, we are neither told to adhere to what seems good to us or to some inflexible set of rules. What does the Quran say? Be mindful of Allah as much as you can. This is in Surah 64, verse 16. Be mindful of Allah as much as you can. You see, Allah teaches us in the Quran certain principles and then tells us to be God conscious, to be mindful of Allah, to have taqwa. And if we have that taqwa, if we are mindful of Allah, if we're mindful of our circumstances, then we will make a decision that is a reasonable decision, depending on our own ability, depending upon our own intelligence, our own experience, our own knowledge of the Quran, our own knowledge of the situation. That might be better or worse. Every individual person is going to come to a better or worse decision. But at the same time, if we are mindful of Allah and mindful of our circumstances, it will be a reasonable decision. And this is what Allah calls us to in the Quran, not some inflexible set of rules that we absolutely have to follow, like they're black and white, cast in stone in every single situation, wherever we are. Islam's not like that. Sharia is not like that. It just does not work that way. The Shaykh continues, obligation is thus defined in accordance to the ideal, while allowing the full accounts of our realities. It is one and the same time submission to the law and freedom of the self. Only the conscience of a believer can internalize the balance without contradiction, since it accepts positive teachings where duties are defined and ranked while recognizing the sanctity of a lived reality. The believer's conscience incorporates within itself the authority of the legislator, who is always present to give advice. It therefore cannot undertake acts that defy the author of the law without betraying its very existence, its very essence, sorry. In doubtful situations, which are a consequence of the human condition and of the freedom granted by this condition, it is essential to try to understand divine recommendation, considering the entirety of all of the rules. Should this effort be undertaken in earnest, there is no guilt on the believer, should the solution turn out to be less than optimal. The Prophet elaborated on this principle by stating the following: the permissible and the prohibited have been made clear, but between the two are unclear cases. He who restrains himself when in doubt preserves his faith and honor. Avoid that which throws you into doubt. Choose that which does not trouble you. Truth is peace. Falsehood leads to suspicion. Ask your heart. Consult your conscience. Good is what gives peace to the soul and the heart. Evil is that which troubles the soul and which makes the heart palpitate. Whatever people may say and whatever they may offer you, even when the law is not doubtful, the conscience still has a role to play in the application of duties, since there are many ways to understand a rule, apply it, and reconcile it with other rules. Our individual imprint on each act remains pivotal. Moreover, all acts are characterized by numerous distinctive features that cannot be fully considered. Effort is required to appreciate values and to address them. You see, the important thing here is just listening to your heart, your conscience, using what you understand of Islam. I'm talking specifically to Muslims here. If people are Christians, if people are Jews or people, they would use their own religious tradition in that space. If they're an atheist, they will use some kind of philosophical ideas. But each of us must use that and look to our hearts, look to our conscience. And as the Prophet said here, ask the heart, consult your conscience. Good is what gives peace to the soul. You will know instinctively. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each one of us a conscience. If you listen to your conscience, whether you are a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, any other belief system, if you listen to your conscience, you will know instinctively, at least the worst of evils, how to avoid them. You will know that they're not good because you will feel it. You will know. Evil is that which troubles the soul and makes the heart palpitate. Whatever people may say and whatever they may offer you, and this is the danger, of course, today we have some people who, even though that's going to cause people to feel like that, they have been led to believe that things which are evil are not evil. And even though their hearts are palpitating, even though their hearts are not comfortable, even though they are not at peace, they go ahead and do the wrong things anyway. That is the thing to be careful of. And the Prophet ﷺ gave us the guidance on how to avoid that and how to make good decisions. The Shaykh continues, conforming one's duty to objective reality is a universal duty. Every person must ask themselves if the action they intend to undertake satisfies the rules. This indetermination is the most eloquent solicitation addressed to our conscience to continue the legislative work which the law has begun. We engage in this process until we are satisfied with our duties and their associated actions. This is the realm in which the authority of the law ceases and our liberties begin. It is clear that rules are not meant to obstruct freedoms, but to enhance them by giving us a starting point. The value of these points of departure is clarified when we consider the variety and quantity of moral precepts that we must manage and prioritize at any given moment, given our finite capacities. This system is both efficient in terms of conserving time and energy, and effective in terms of reducing the chance of errors. To illustrate, consider the following. My body, my mind, my family, my homeland, each of my attachments requires an action determined by a rule. However, when I get up this morning, I organize a timetable of tasks in different ways and set out the itinerary in order to put them into action. During the given lapse of time, I can integrate a number of diverse good works, perform one to a higher degree of perfection than the others, accomplish one as early or late as possible, content myself with ordinary forms of doing good and strive to create something new, of greater value. In such a way, everyone may freely compose an original page on their moral life, whilst respecting the general rules of this human art. The rules have already been implicitly or explicitly made by the legislator. However, it is us who must define our concrete duties from these ideals to the best of our capacity. True morality is thus akin to citizenship, participating in some way in the authority of the law by the choice and initiative to which we are entitled. From this perspective, true morality is both pure submission and absolute invention. By adhering to the sacred law, our conscience assimilates it, defends it, makes it its own, as if participating in the creation of eternal truths. When we synthesize different rules, adjusting them to our situation, we do not do so in the absence of a master, but under his patronage, his supervision and control. We always draw inspiration from him, as if he still continued within us the role of legislator, down to the slightest detail. From this day, a fusion of two worlds. So it's vital to understand that that the final decision on these matters, it remains within us. The Quran gives us a guide. The Prophet ﷺ's teachings give us a guide. But even the Prophet ﷺ himself taught us that, there's going to be things between that which is very clear, which we're not going to have a clear understanding of. And so we have to come to that conclusion ourselves. But as long as we remain mindful of Allah and mindful of what we've learned from the religion and from, the other teachings, then, and also the circumstances within which we find ourselves, as long as we remain mindful of those things, then whatever decision we come to, even if it's not the best decision, it won't be the worst. And there is no blame in that. Okay, I'm going to sign off there. The book that I'm reading from is Morality in the Quran by Muhammad Abdullah Draz. Muhammad Abdullah Draz was an Azhari scholar from the past century. And I highly recommend reading this book. It will certainly help you understand Islam better and the Quran and understand the morality that is essential within Islam. May Allah bless you all and guide you. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.